Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Westland City Council to order. We'll begin it out with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman James Godbout.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Councilman Godbout.
Present.
Councilwoman Green.
Present.
Councilman Herzberg.
Here.
Councilman Londo.
Here.
Councilman McDermott.
Here.
Councilwoman Rakowski.
Here.
President Hart.
Present.
Quorum is present.
At this time, we'll open up questions to the public. Questions or input on the agenda from the public. The public will have 3 minutes to ask any questions relative to items that are on the business agenda for today. You can either use the Zoom app to raise your hand and be recognized, or *9 if you're using your phone if you're dialed in. And then at that point, you'll also need to press *6 after you've been recognized to unmute your phone. Are there any comments from the public on the agenda? Second call, any comments from the public on the agenda? Third call, any comments from the public on the agenda? We do have a hand raised. Phone number ending in 017, I believe that's Richard Graham.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
We can.
Okay. Good evening and hope all is well with you and your families. It's Richard Graham with Move Westland Forward. Agenda item 8 under new business, the police officer's new contract. The increase is 2% each year over the 4 years, but does not come close to the increases Mayor Wild wants to give the facilities director, Vic Barra, at approximately 70% increase, nor the economic director, Deputy Mayor Reddy's niece, at approximately 15%, nor even the lavish pay and benefit increase Mayor Wild provided to his directors and his staff. Even our outsourced non-union assessor saw a double-digit increase in pay. Always interesting who gets the highest raises within Westland. Agenda item 7 under new business. Finally, information the city will be providing to share with the residents about the COVID-19 money being supplied by the federal government. Thank you, Councilwoman Green, for letting the residents know well over a week ago now that we'll be receiving over $650,000 from the feds. Not sure why so many other communities already let their residents know and started to implement. What is really interesting, Mayor Wild's plan only helps less than 0.5% of all the residents and businesses, 0.5%. So many other communities are helping a much higher percentage of residents or businesses. Why is the city charging a 20% fee or $131,000 to put in the city's pocket? Interesting, a city like Canton is only charging 10%. If were truly a compassionate city, we would not charge anything and try to help the majority of the residents' businesses, not the select few. It will be interesting to see which Team Wild businesses will get the bulk of the loan, of the grants. I believe they're grants. Regarding item C under the consent calendar regarding the April 25th council budget meeting. It was appalling to see Mayor Wild along with Deputy Mayor Reddy walk off the job. Council President Hart was running the meeting and they just left their post and refused to return because things probably weren't going their way. Shameful. Hello?
I think you dropped your back now.
Okay. I was saying regarding the April 25th meeting when Mayor Wild along with Deputy Mayor Reddy walked off the job. Council President Hart was running the meeting and they just left their post and refused to return because things were not going their way. Very shameful. And the council president, since he was running and this was his meeting, should frankly issue a public reprimand, both verbally and in writing. They left the meeting and they left their job. Thank you.
All right, next we have your name that's in here is Greenhouse Jerry. So Greenhouse Jerry, your hand is raised. You've been recognized. You should be able to speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, I run a greenhouse in Wall Lake, and having me in your town would be really, really, very, very bad. And having me in your town is not what I would recommend.
Mr. Jerry, first of all, there's nothing on the agenda, and I'm not sure if you really are Jerry from the greenhouse.
You're going to interrupt me.
Well, this is open items on the agenda. So which item on the agenda are you addressing, sir?
The fact that we had posted on the internet that we're supposed to call the city council and talk about the greenhouse and what the city council wants with dispensaries in town.
Sir, again, but right now this is for items on the agenda. So are you
So
addressing any items
which
on the
area
agenda?
would you like me to join in?
There is an open comment section near the end for anything that you want to discuss. But right now, this is for the agenda.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the public on the agenda? Second call. Third and final call. Any comments from the public on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll close citizens' comments on the agenda and we move to the consent calendar. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll support it.
Motion by Councilman Godbout, supported by Council President Pro Tem Londo. Is there any discussion? Councilman Hersberg.
Thank you, President Hart. Through the chair to Attorney Fasson, if we could just briefly explain items H through K so that we understand them.
Mr. Fasson?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. These items are introductions of ordinance changes. Item H deals with abandoned personal property to identify, this is a problem identified by the Neighborhood Services Group. This makes it clear about when that personal property that's been placed at the curb, these often are related to tenant evictions, need to be removed. And the notice provisions to the owner of the property for that removal. So that's what item H is. Item I is related to grass cutting and weed removal. Again, these are challenges that have been identified by Neighborhood Services. It amends the existing ordinance to establish how that notification to property owners is to proceed, and creates an appeal board for them, that being property owners, to raise complaints about the need for and the costs associated with weed removal and grass cutting, and makes the reimbursement of the city, its expenses and outside costs a little clearer as well. This is derived out of some of the litigation that we've seen in the past and some things we're trying to clear up in that regards. Item J is the introduction dealing with animal control. We have a new animal control officer in Neighborhood Services as well, has brought this forward to suggest some changes to the existing ordinance, Chapter 18 of Animal Control. It makes it clear it applies to pets and wildlife, not just dogs. It also has a prohibition on the tethering, the daily tethering of a dog, which was not in there before, and makes it clear that this is a misdemeanor fine in this ordinance which is introduced. Then finally, item, I think it's K, is for the fees for weed cutting and abandoned property, which we just talked about. This is a companion ordinance change to make it clear that the city's out-of-pocket expenses and charges and costs for time and effort are reimbursable. And these fees are moved over to the administrative fee schedule so that all of the fees are sort of aggregated in one spot and they get looked at. The administrative fee schedule gets looked at annually by the finance department. When the fees are sprinkled throughout all of the ordinances, it's easy to overlook it. And this was identified as one that would be better off if it was in the administrative fee schedule, so it was regularly reviewed. So those are what the 4 introductions that are on your consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Fasone. I just wanted that clarification so that everybody in the audience, everybody listening knows what those are about. I would have liked to have had a study session on some of those items before moving forward, but it's pretty cut and dry. But I do have more discussion on item K. So with that, I'll make a motion to move that to new business, item 1A.
The motion to move consent calendar item K to new business. Is there support?
Support.
Support from Councilman McDermott. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Roll call.
Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
Yes.
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
Yes.
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Item K will be 1A.
Returning to the original motion on the consent calendar is modified. Is there any other discussion? Councilwoman Green.
During our last city council meeting, there was discussion with finance, specifically Steve Smith and others, in terms of our city council packets having been changed without the written authorization from city council. During that meeting, I addressed issue with the city taking it upon themselves to ask for funding, for city council to approve funding after having revised our budget packet, taking out 2 line items that would tell us how much money was budgeted for the request and if an appropriation is necessary. And
Councilwoman
looking
Green,
at,
I'm just trying to understand where you're at so I can follow you. Which item on the consent calendar are you addressing, just so I can follow along?
I'm talking about the entire consent calendar and the discussion at our last city council meeting that you were present for. There were multiple requests for funding from the city, at which time I raised a question as to, and I asked specifically for probably clarification for anywhere from 5 to 7 line items to determine how much money was in the budget, if this item was budgeted, and if appropriation was necessary, because the city took all of that information out of our council packets and placed all of the items onto the consent calendar. At that meeting, at the previous city council meeting, I made a request that the city put change our packets back to the original manner that they were provided to city council, and in that they refrain from removing information that is pertinent to our ability to make a financial decision on their recommendations. I was told by Steve Smith during that meeting, it was on video, unless that's one of the videos that you all went ahead and deleted at your pleasure, but during that meeting, or deleted from YouTube and will not be airing to the city. But during that particular meeting, there was discussion, and Steve Smith stated during the meeting that the city council packet would be revised to its original condition, and that those changes he could not confirm during the meeting who actually made the change, which is typical, but he did state that the packet would be changed back to its original condition. That has not yet happened. So my question is, through the chair, to Steve Smith or the mayor or whomever, Steve Smith was not able to answer who made the change within the administration, although this change was made by one of the directors who report to the mayor, or possibly at the instruction of the mayor himself. I cannot I don't want to spend time guessing. I know it was intentional, and the packets have not been revised. So when will that occur? And why has it not been done? There was a commitment by Steve Smith during the last meeting. And again, as I said at the last meeting, I think it is deceptive to give City Council a packet and remove two important line items telling us how much was budgeted for that particular expenditure and if an appropriation is necessary. I think that is totally and intentionally deceptive, but I'd like to learn why that occurred and when it is going to happen, and if it my expectation is that it happens soon, since council was made aware, or excuse me, the city was made aware of it during the last city council meeting. So I'll wait for a response. Thank you.
Jim Fasson, you have your hand raised. You want to address this?
I do. Through the chair, I talked about H through K just now. Those introductions have no budgetary line item to say they're in the budget or any allocation associated with the budget. I guess I should have made that clear in my explanation. Thank you.
Through the chair to Attorney Falzone, I wasn't speaking in terms of H through K. Item E actually is a budgetary line item and it's not in there. And the problem is, or the point is, that the city took out line items off of these financial documents and put it on our plate and had removed the information intentionally. And here we are at the very next city council meeting weeks later, and it's still not there. So whether this is a budgetary item or not, which again, I didn't raise H through K, that was Councilman Hertzberg. E is in fact a budgetary item and it is not in there. So I guess that the focus or the clarification should be, why did the city take that information out? Because it had not. I've been on city council 3 years. It was always in our packets. And then when is it going to return?
Mayor?
Thank you, Council President. Through the chair to Councilwoman Green. Here's what we'll do is I'll sit down with, when we put the budget, when we put the agenda together for the next council meeting, we sit down with council leadership, both council president and council president pro tem, and we'll address that issue at that point. What it is it's just a format, and it appears that the formatting of the agenda items changed, and it sounds like, at least you particularly like the former format. So I'm not partial to either one of them, but if that's the format that council would like to see it in, that's what we'll return to. And Council President, perhaps you can add that to our agenda when we meet on the next council agenda. That seems like something that we should be able to, unless there's something that changed in the BSNA or something like that, we'll get that cleaned up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I just wanted to clarify that it's not a matter of preference. It is a matter of transparency. The city intentionally removed pertinent financial information and basically have recreated or revised these documents to only ask us for money, for us to greenlight whatever monies you all are requesting. And you took out the line items that told us if this is a budgeted item or if this is a brand new request not in the budget. It also does not tell us if an appropriation is necessary. So I just wanted to clarify, this is not for the people who may be watching and may not understand what the mayor just stated. This is not a matter of preference. This is a matter of transparency and you providing information to city council to make a fully informed decision, which has been the process even before I was elected to office. So why in the last handful of weeks, you all took it upon yourself to take that information from city council and remove it and then say, here, please give me tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars without even, with intentionally hiding whether or not this is a budgeted item and if we have to appropriate funding. So I just wanted to clarify for those who are not familiar with the budget, this is not a Tasha Green request. This is a request on behalf of the citizens of Westland, which has been the process since prior to my being elected to office. And I would like it as a city councilwoman, and I speak for myself, and I will not be making any financial decisions with that information having been intentionally removed. And again, I feel it is intentionally deceptive move on behalf of the city. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Mayor, did you want to address that again?
Yeah, just one thing I'd like to say is, first of all, Steve Smith would like to weigh in on this, and certainly nothing was done deceptively. And while I take offense to those comments, I'm going to let that go, because I do think that this is a democracy and everybody's voice is important. And Mrs. Green certainly shared her opinion, and I'm going to say I disagree with it, but I agree that we need to keep the meeting moving forward. But Steve Smith has asked to address that, Council President.
Mr. Smith?
So through the chair, Councilwoman Green. So I echo what the mayor had said. Nothing was done deceptively. Everything that was previously on the council packet with regards to agenda items is still in the body of it. And if it needs a budget amendment, it is clearly wrote out within that agenda item that there would be a budget amendment necessary. I think the only thing that's missing is maybe it does state whether the item was budgeted. It may not state how much was budgeted, but it definitely has the information that council needs to make a decision on the agenda item. And I just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Rakowski.
Just as a point of clarification for the current consent calendar item E, it does state that it's in the current budget. So I'm curious as to what other information has been included in the past, not having served when perhaps the packets were different, but it does say that it's a budgeted cost.
Yep, I see it as well. So if there's no other discussion on this, are there any other questions on the Councilwoman Green?
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to address that. If you look, actually, through the chair to Councilwoman Rakowski, you can go onto the city website and look at all of our prior city council packets. You will see year over year when the city was asking for funding from city council, there's 4 boxes there with at the very top of every request. There's 4 line items in squares at the very top, making it very easy to take a glance and get that information. The line items that you will find on the city website, if you want to go back through any of our city council packets, the first line item stated expenditure required. That is still there. That tells the city council how much money the city is asking for, how many taxpayer dollars are they asking for. The second line item directly underneath that one, which has been removed, that I spoke about at the last city council meeting, and Steve Smith guaranteed me that it would be put back in this packet, which it has not. So that was a false statement. The second line stated amount budgeted. The third line stated appropriation required. And then the fourth line that is still there says line item number. So what the city took out from the top of this, the documentation, which was actually a template, a long-term template on our city council packets. And again, you can go to the city website and pull up all of our packets. They took out the amount, the line item that says amount budgeted. They took that off. Could not speak to why that was done, but it was definitely an internal city decision. Also, appropriation required, which is typically a reflection of either $0 or simply a yes or a no, that was removed as well. So in terms of there being a statement, whether it's deceptive or not, I would think that it is. If you are asking us to approve taxpayers' dollars and removing information to tell us if this is a part of the budget that we already approved and if we have to appropriate funding. And relative to Steve stating that this is not, whatever it is, he made a commitment at the last meeting. He also stated at the last meeting he could not confirm which individual in the city made that decision, although he is the senior person who handles all the funding in the city of Westland. So whether or not we can fish through paragraphs over paragraphs over paragraphs over within packets that sometimes are, I've seen them as large as 400 pages, we should not have to do that. And the city cannot explain why they took that out while asking us to approve hundreds and millions of dollars every 2 weeks. So my request stands as it did at the last meeting. Put it back in there and do not change our packets without written notification and authorization to and from City Council. Thank you.
Councilman Godbout.
Council President, I'd like to call the question.
Question's been called.
Support.
Support. Roll call on calling the question.
Council President, who offered support for that motion, please?
Sorry, Council President Pro Tem Michael Londo.
Thank you. As far as calling the question, the yes vote means we will move directly into the other vote. Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
Yes.
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
Yes.
President Hart.
Yes.
A unanimous vote has been cast. We'll move directly into roll call for the consent calendar as presented, with item K being moved to 1A. Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Point of clarification, has the consent calendar been placed up for approval or?
yes.
Yes, the question was called and now the active roll is for yes or no vote on the consent calendar.
Oh, okay. I thought we were taking a roll call vote on whether or not to approve the motion that Councilman Hart put on the floor to call the question. So you're saying there was no roll call vote to call the question?
Councilwoman Green, so first, just clarification, Councilman Godbout made the call to call the question. We took a roll call on calling that question because it requires supermajority of the council to go ahead and approve to call the question. The question is called. Immediately, once the question is called and passed by the council, then we immediately go into roll call for the question at hand, which is the consent calendar.
Right, so that's my question. Is this the approval of this consent calendar?
That is correct.
Okay, I'll be a no due to the previous statements I made. Thank you.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
Yes.
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
Yes.
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes. Council has approved the following consent calendar items: approval of minutes of the regular meeting held April 20, 2020, approval of minutes of the budget study session held April 18, 2020, approval of minutes of budget study session held April 25, 2020, approval of minutes of budget study session held April 30, 2020, approval of bid for cold patch. Administration recommended the lone bidder, Cadillac Asphalt Incorporated. The bid is for 3 years with an option to renew for an additional 2-year period. Approval of website hosting and maintenance subscription renewal with Granicus. Approval of lease agreement renewals with Wayne Metropolitan Community Action Agency, National Faith Homebuyers, Nankin Transit Commission, and Beginning Step. Agreements commenced July 1, 2020 for a 5-year lease term. Introduction of Ordinance 192C2, an ordinance to amend Chapter 83 of the Westland City Code, Sections 83.1, 83.2, 83.4, and 83.5 to regulate abandoned personal property and provide for its removal after 48 hours. introduction of ordinance 29W412, an ordinance to amend chapter 22, article 4 of the Westland City Code to amend sections 22 through 132 and to add sections 22-134 through 22-136 to establish procedures for the removal of weeds. Introduction of ordinance 167A9, an ordinance to amend chapter 18, articles 1 and 2 of the Westland City Code to amend sections 18.3, 18.17, 18.22, 18.23, 18.24, and 18.41 to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the city of Westland by regulating the control and care of animals. Adoption of prepared resolution to establish a request for funding, designate an agent, attest to the existence of funds, and commit to implementing a maintenance program for the South Schuman Street sidewalk from Fairchild to Palmer. Last item approved on the consent calendar, adoption of prepared resolution to authorize the implementation of Michigan Economic Development Corporation's recommendations to obtain redevelopment-ready communities certification. Moving to new business. Item 1A, introduction of ordinance 29W311, an ordinance to amend chapter 46 of the Westland City Code, sections 46.1 through 46.2, and to provide for fees for weed cutting and the removal of abandoned personal property.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Hersberg. Is there support?
Support.
Is that Mr. Godbout? Was that you?
Yes.
Motion by Councilman Hersberg, supported by Councilman Godbout. Is there any discussion? I see Councilman Hersberg's hand is raised.
Thank you. So through the chair to finance, this was brought up during our budget meetings. I'm just looking for the breakdown exactly. I'm trying to understand this here because it lists the fees that we're going to be charging, but then it also says the fees are in addition to expenses incurred by the city for labor for the contractor. So if you have the breakdown for us, how much are residents actually going to be charged? How much is going to the city? And how much will the contractor get?
So through the chair to Councilman Hersberg. So the way the ordinance is set up now is going to be based on the cost that the city incurs. Previously, this was outlined in chapter 46 in the fee schedule, and it was based upon a set dollar amount. So for instance, on the weed cuttings, it was based on the front footage of the lot. So every 20 feet of the lot, the price would go up. So what we've done here is we've just based it basically on the cost that the city incurs. The city doesn't make any money on weed cuts. The idea is to break even on the weed cuts at worst. So for instance, there's a cost of the contractor to go out and cut the grass. There's a cost for the clerical to process the invoices. There's a cost for the clerical to receipt the money when it comes in. So there's all these costs that get broke down. And the way it's worded is, as salaries go up, it will allow us to change those without necessarily having to go to council every year. It'll be on the administrative fee schedule every year. So I don't know if that helps, but
yeah, you actually answered my other question too. So we're going to break even, and then I'm sure a lot of people watching right now are questioning what we're talking about because they're not looking at the same thing we are. But the cost is going down significantly, cut in half or more than cut in half. So
yes, through the chair, the cost will actually go down. Yes, with this new method.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. And then just as a final comment on these other ordinances that were on the consent calendar, I just think as the legislative body of the city, I think we should have had that presented to us in a study session so we can understand it clearer and we can give input. So in the future, I know we're in tough times right now, but moving forward, if new ordinances are coming through, I'd appreciate to sit down with council in a study session over it. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the council on item 1A? Roll call.
Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
yes,
Councilwoman Rakowski,
yes,
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Moving to new business, item 1, public hearing for the proposed 2020 through 2021 budget. This public hearing date was set March 16, 2020.
All right, before we open the public hearing for comment, Mayor Wild, did you have something you wanted to add?
Thank you, Council President. I'm just going to kind of say a few words, and then I'm going to pass it over to Dan Block, who's going to just do a little bit more detail for the public. Council, you know this, but the public may not know, is that we had turned into City Council back in April my proposed 2021 budget. It is a $72 million balanced budget. The proposed budget adds approximately $60,000 to the city's general fund surplus, which will push that fund balance to approximately $6 million. A big part of the budget, as far as manpower, it includes the city's portion of the federal SAFER grant, which is to hire 13 firefighters. Some key points in this year's budget. The budget does include updated central service department overhead allocations throughout the budget that was derived from an independent third-party report that was commissioned by the city back in 2019. And Council, you know, this is what we have been referring to throughout this process, is the Maximus report. Another key part of my proposed budget is the city plans to levy the 1 mil sanitation millage that was recently passed by the residents. And that levy will put the city in a position to stabilize the sanitation fund. We will be able to fund a recycling program. We're also looking at purchasing 2 new garbage trucks, and we'll be able to pay down the debt to the capital improvement fund from past truck purchases. The proposed budget also addresses a longstanding issue that we've had with our MERS pension fund. This is the general pensions for Westland employee retirees. And we're proposing to issue taxable bonds to cover 95% of the outstanding debt. This will be over 20 years. In council, we had a study session where we started to take a look at that, and we're going to go into that in more detail as we move throughout the budget process. But that will basically create a 95% funding balance there, and it's also going to result in annual savings, and in the current budget, in approximately $68 million in savings over 20 years. The proposed budget also addresses the city's unfunded OPEB debt. That's our retirement healthcare debt. By paying an additional $500,000 above our required payment, and also setting aside $150,000 to fund a program to offer incentives for retirees to forego the city's health care. And then the last point I'm going to talk on is my proposed budget also includes a proposal to retain the services of Police Chief Jeff Jedrusik, who is currently available to retire. And council, we've had 2 study sessions now. We've gone through all the departments. We've looked at revenues. I know that moving forward, we're going to circle back with council and set up time to do a deeper dive into the allocations to the Maximus report and their and how they reflect on the library. So we're going to sit down with council and go through that in a little more detail. We're certainly going to sit down on the sanitation piece. We're expecting our request for proposals to come back on recycling on the 12th. So we'll sit down and talk about that as well. And then certainly we can go into more detail on my proposal to retain the services of the police chief. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dan Block.
Thank you, Mayor. The proposed 2020-2021 budget is on the city's website. It's under the Open Gov section of the city's website. I'll touch on a little bit of the city's taxable value and millage rates, and then some capital related items. So for the city's taxable value in the proposed budget is expected to increase by approximately $341,000 for additional operating dollars. The city's total proposed millage rate is 19.7143, which includes the Operating Act 359 of 1925, the Sanitation, Library, and Act 345 millage rates. The Headley rollback factor is estimated to be around 0.9909, which reduces the operating, sanitation, and library millages. The city's millage rate for Act 359 of 1925 decreased to stay within the 50,000 maximum levy. And then the recently approved sanitation millage is proposed at 1 mil. All other millage rates remain the same. The proposed budget also includes some planned expenditures of $5.3 million in the city's major and local roads. And then in addition, the budget includes a total of $3.6 million in water and sewer capital projects throughout the city. And lastly, the proposed budget includes approximately $1 million of planned capital related expenditures in the capital outlay fund. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the council president. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Again, this is a public hearing for the budget that was just introduced. At this time, citizens, residents from the public can call in, have up to 3 minutes to speak to this budget introduction. I have one hand raised, phone number ending in 354. You should be able to talk now. Are you there? Phone number ending in 354. You try to unmute your phone. You'll have to hit *6. All right, if I don't hear from you in a second, I'll have to move on. Try to unmute your phone. All right, moving on. Phone number ending 017. I believe that is Richard Graham.
Good evening again. I assume everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Before I start, Richard Graham with Move Westland Ford. Interesting. Mayor Wild talked about the budget. Interesting regarding sanitation. He talked about the 2 fire trucks, but he said nothing about recycling. Interesting that, you know, in that couple sentences that he did for the sanitation or the tax millage for trash, nothing about recycling. Anyway, regarding the budget, I have reviewed the budget along with lots of residents, and in general, it is a pretty weak budget. A lot of increases for the highest income earners, lots of rating of other departments to put a Band-Aid on the failing general fund. Not one police officer is being added for yet another year. I believe the police chief stated the possible need for a millage and the overall desire for more officers on the April 25th meeting. What is appalling is a rating of the library and sanitation budget to plug the general fund issue. Why take from the library and put them into a loss, negative fiscally, for next year's budget? Why force them to go into their savings? Why maybe force them to lay off librarians, cut services, or even ask for an additional millage? Council President Godbout and Steve Smith, Finance Director, seem to think it's okay for them to use their surplus. But Mr. Godbout does not want to do the same to hire just one police officer. Mayor Wild had Team Wild on council approve a study by a company called Maximus to justify rating the departments that are run with a separate millage. Did you know the library is being charged by the city and specifically the clerk's office and finance department? The clerk's office is at $13,000. What are they doing for this? City Clerk LeBlanc approved this after the Maximus findings were finished and presented to the city. The finance department is at $197,000 and accounts for 15% of their overall workload. Do they really do that much work for the library? The answer is probably no, but Wild supplied Maximus with the data, which could be garbage in, garbage out. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak on this open hearing? Second call. Anyone from the public? Third and final call. Is there a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Councilman Landau, supported by Councilwoman Rakowski. Is there any discussion on closing the open public hearing? Any discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
Yes.
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
Yes.
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. New business item 2, request for a closed study session, May 11, 2020 at 6:00 PM in the Gene McKinney Ballroom with MRMA, that might be MMRA, Council to discuss settlement option in Trujillo versus City of Westland.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Godbout. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilman McDermott. Is there any discussion? Councilwoman Green.
Thank you. This line item specifically is saying in the Gene McKinney Ballroom. So is this a request that council go to City Hall and be present, or can you clarify why this states at 6 PM in the Gene McKinney Ballroom, or will this, yeah, could you clarify that, please?
Absolutely, Councilman Green. I set the request to do the close. This is a closed study session. So we wanted to do it in person. It can't be recorded. It can't be televised. So we're setting this up to have social distancing, all the precautions being taken place and conducting this really quick closed study session at City Hall.
Okay, and there's no way to do a closed study session via Zoom in light of the fact that the city does not live stream all of our videos and have deleted other videos? Isn't there a way to only allow access from a security standpoint? If we set up a special login and dial in, that's not, isn't that possible?
While it may be possible, there's still way too much opportunity for us to create the safe environment for a closed study session. So it was my decision, and I consulted with Fasson as well, or excuse me, Attorney Fasson. This would probably be the smart and the most ethical way to conduct our closed study session.
Okay, and I'm assuming that you are going to provide PPE, personal protection equipment in the form of gloves and masks for the people who, for me as a city council member. I'm assuming that that will be made available before I walk into that ballroom.
Councilman Green, if you need one, I'm more than happy to provide one. Just send me an email and I'll make sure I get that in, those materials to you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
Yes.
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
Yes.
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. New business item 3, adoption of prepared resolution to request establishment of a public hearing date to review an amendment to the Local Development Finance Authority plan.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Hersberg,
Support.
supported by Councilman Godbout. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
Yes.
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
Yes.
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. New business, item 4, approval of Community Development Block Grant and Home Annual Action Plan Final Statement, July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2021.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Godbout, supported by
Londo.
Councilman Londo. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
yes,
Councilman Londo.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
yes,
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. New business, item 5, adoption of prepared resolution to adopt community development block grant and home funded projects and programs listed in the final statement and budget by the Westland City Council. The city administration is authorized to prepare and submit the Community Development Block Grant Home Annual Action Plan 2020 through 2021 to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And both the city administration and city attorney are authorized to prepare and execute the necessary agreements to implement the projects and listed programs.
so moved,
Motion by Councilwoman Rakowski,
support,
support by Councilman McDermott. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Councilwoman Green. You're muted, Councilwoman. Can't hear you.
Oh, I said I apologize. I don't have any discussion on item 6.
Okay, understood. Is there any other discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
yes,
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
yes,
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. New business, item 6, approval of Community Development Block Grant CV Funding Allocation Plan, including budget and recommended projects.
So move.
Motion by Councilman Londo,
Support.
supported by Councilman Godbout. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Councilwoman Green. You're muted again, Councilwoman.
Thank you. I'm pulling up the page of the packet. This is for the CDBG funds, correct?
Item 7, prepared resolution for the CDBG consolidated plan for the CDBG CV funded projects.
This was 6.
No, I mean,
I apologize. Item 6. They're all blending together. I apologize.
we're on 7, correct?
No, we're on 6.
Oh, okay, I apologize. I don't know why I could, okay, thank you.
No other discussion, Councilwoman?
No, I thought we were on item 7, thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Even I got tripped up. No worries. Roll call.
Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
yes,
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
yes,
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. New business, item 7, adoption of prepared resolution to adopt substantial amendment to the Community Development Block Grant Consolidated Plan 2016 through 2021 for the CDBG CV funded projects listed in the proposed projects and use of funds and budget and amendments to the the Citizen Participation Plan by the Westland City Council. The administration is authorized to prepare and submit the consolidated plan CDBG CV Substantial Amendment 2016 through 2021 to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and both the city administration and city attorney are authorized to prepare and execute the necessary agreements to implement the listed projects.
So move.
Motion by
Support.
Councilman Londo, supported by Councilman McDermott. Okay, is there any discussion? Councilwoman Green. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Okay, so I have several questions on line item 7. This is for the $657,944 in funding, COVID funding for the city of Westland. Is that correct? The CARES Act funding?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because there was a couple of hiccups. So, okay, so the first question I have is relative to the recommendation for, it says provision of rental or mortgage assistance to low to moderate income families. Last week, I asked for the guidelines for selection to ensure that this selection process would be fair and equally beneficial to everyone who qualified. So my question relative to, or questions relative to the rent and mortgage portion, which has been recommended that we allocate $219,069 to help 35 households who will receive $500 a month for 6 months with a renewable 6 months. So basically that is 35 Westland families or 35 families / single persons who will get $6,000 over, who are eligible for $6,000 over the course of the next year. And so my question is, why are we not, and I understand the program or the recommendation to help families, but to only help 35 people and give them up to a year of assistance, when if we wanted to offer $500 a month, in addition to the programs that people now qualify for with rental payment, mortgage assistance, unemployment, the food stamps, utility assistance. If we're going to take 35 families who are also in need, why would we only do 35 families? And why would we give these 35 families up to a year when we can potentially, if you want to help someone for 6 months, which we're hoping that this crisis does not extend, or the sting of this crisis does not extend beyond hopefully a 6-month period, but that's to be determined. Why would we only select 35 families and give them a year of assistance when we can actually, based on this math, if we're going to give people $500 a month, why wouldn't we choose 70? Like double that number of 35 people and give them 6 months worth of funding versus giving 35 households a year's worth. To me, I'm not in agreement with that recommendation. That number is too low to take $219,000 and only give it to 35 families. To me, that is not acceptable. And there are people who may be looking at eviction and foreclosure right now today that we can provide help for them to get them through this crisis. And then once their unemployment kicks in or once they're back to work, we don't necessarily have to commit to a 6-month stipend that may not be needed, but once we approve it, it's pretty much done. Whereas we could have people on the other side of town or whatever, a neighboring family who's actually looking at it foreclosure, but we just set 35 families up for the next year, not even knowing if their financial circumstance will change 2, 3, 4 months later. So I'm not in agreement with that particular allocation, and I'd like to see it set up to where we're helping families who we know are in need, and that we help as many families as possible versus a 35 families get all of the rental assistance that we're going to provide with these fundings. I'm not in agreement with that.
Councilwoman, Do you
Yeah.
mind if I let Joanne kind of address some of these things high level while you're asking these questions? I don't want any of your questions to get lost.
Absolutely, thank you.
Joanne, can you kind of walk us through this?
There we go. Yes, thank you through the council president. I will start with making comments that this funding is a brand new type of funding for cities. It came through the CARES Act, as you all know, and it came with hopes that it could be allocated quickly, but with almost no guidelines from HUD. We have our first actual call with HUD tomorrow with the director of the Detroit HUD Office of Community Planning and Development. And so my counterparts in the other communities in Michigan, we're all trying to work together to come up with the best use of these funds for our communities, but at the same time to do it in a responsible manner and to do it in a way that is most beneficial for our communities. The suggestion of providing rent and mortgage assistance to families who have been affected by the COVID-19 crisis. It is a suggestion to begin with 6 months of rental or mortgage assistance, and then it would be re-evaluated during that period to see if those families need to have continued assistance. And if not, then we're able to assist more families. But at the same time, we wouldn't want to put a family in a situation where we begin assisting them with their rent or their mortgage payments and then pull that away from them if they need to be assisted for a longer period of time. And so that is the thought behind that. And this is just one of the 3 pieces of our plan. We also have funds set aside for small business loans or grants, and then funds to purchase personal protection equipment for the community. So this is just one piece of the plan, but we certainly would review the need for a continued rental or mortgage assistance after the first 6 months. All of the families that receive assistance under any or businesses or the PPE, everybody will be people in need. We have to follow the HUD guidelines for income limits, and we have to ensure that, for example, in the guidelines that were presented to City Council, in order to qualify for the rent or mortgage assistance, the families will provide us with documentation that they're not having their rent or mortgage delayed, where they don't have to pay it at this time. We wouldn't provide them assistance if they have that postponement, and the guidelines do cover those aspects.
Thank you, Joanne. Councilwoman Green, did you have anything else to add to that before I ask any other questions from the council?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Through the chair to Joanne, thank you for that. But actually, working with several progressive organizations, one in particular that I'm on a conference call with the governor's office every Friday, also in contact with the state attorney general's office. The law in Michigan is nobody, if they cannot pay their rent, nobody has to pay it, and they cannot be evicted. The law, a landlord who attempts to evict someone for non-payment of rent now is actually breaking the law, and Attorney General Nessel did a cease and desist letter to a handful of landlords who tried to beat the system last month. So nobody, when you mention this letter that they're going to present, that they don't have the privilege of a rental delay or mortgage delay. Everybody in the state of Michigan has it right now. The federal government did a mandate for all Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae loans to where they can't even push forward with foreclosure. So every resident in the city of Westland who meets the financial criteria in terms of income is equally eligible. And that's my question in terms of the selection process being fair to everybody in the city. And because the need is so great, why would we limit it to 35 families nobody is going to present you with that. Nobody will have that letter that you requested, because the law does not require rental payment or foreclosure or mortgage payment right now, although people are paying who can still afford to pay, but that's not even on the table. And then we have programs like Wayne Metro, MHDHS, all types of programs that are set up, and they are actually paying utility shutoffs. I mean, everything from food, even funeral and cremation services. Unemployment is now kicked up to $600 plus whatever the person was eligible for. There are people now making more money on unemployment than they made when they were actually working, depending on their position. So I don't think that limiting this to 35 families, when everybody is in the same boat in terms of eligibility, if they meet the income criteria and they can't afford to pay, to say 35 families get 6 months, when if we're out of this crisis in 90 days, that's 3 more months that actually could help somebody else, versus, just setting up this long-term program that's only going to benefit 35 families for up to 1 year. $219,000 is a lot of money to give to only 35 families in Westland. So I would like to see that recommendation change. I don't think that that's a good way to utilize 35 or $290,000. Also, my other question was, there was no full explanation in terms of this grants for Westland small businesses that employ low to moderate income employees. We're going to give 30 grants for $5,000 to $25,000 for that, and then project administration of $131,588. So that's the city of Westland. The federal government gave us money to assist our families, and Westland has a large percentage of low income, fixed income families. We're going to take $131,000, and I understand that we have to retain some funding because we have to have people who can process these applications. There's going to be time, but to take that large percentage of money and for us to keep it, when we have families who, some of these families, especially immigrant families, they don't even qualify for some of these programs because of their immigration status. So we have a lot of families who could actually, and who are in need of these funds, and we're proposing giving 35 families a really good opportunity. And again, I'm fighting for this with the governor's office and working very closely for this programs with the CARE Act and other programs that we're trying to get more moratoriums for mortgage, as well as this rental moratorium that's getting ready to expire on the 15th, making sure that that's extended as well. So I'm very familiar with these fundings. And again, I'm fighting for these funds even outside of my duty as a councilwoman. But I don't agree with us taking that large of a piece of a pie. The mayor's administration just got a 2% raise across the board. I don't think that we should keep that much money in terms of our compassion and knowing that these people need help and they need help now. And if we're not, we could actually take some of that money and go and get some supplies. I have residents calling me all the time, as recently as yesterday, saying that they contacted the mayor's office to get, see if there was any masks and gloves available. And they were told by Jackie, a couple of them said that Jackie said she didn't know any information. And then some of them were told to call the Friendship Center, and the Friendship Center is for seniors. So they're only giving away, I guess they can get 1 mask. Like, we can do so much better with that funding. We don't need to keep $131,000 in-house, and we need to allocate these funds to help more than 35 families. And I would so that's how I feel about it. And then can you just speak to this small business grant program? How are you going to determine whether they get 5,000 versus 25? And how do we overcome, or I guess, not find ourselves being accused of selective choices in terms of which businesses get the money and which businesses don't? Can you explain the small business program, and then when the application process will open up for when we'll start taking applications for small businesses? Thank you.
All right, so Joanne, did you want to address that? Okay.
Yes, thank you through the council president. I would like to first address it is true that there is a moratorium currently on people who can't make their mortgage and rental payments. However, all of that money is still due to the mortgage companies and the rental owners. So setting aside funds in this manner will help families in a situation when they're needing to pay that money back. It's not, they don't get free rent for 3 months or free mortgage for 3 months. Those funds will have to be repaid. And again, we're talking about low-income families who don't necessarily have the extra money. Perhaps their unemployment didn't come through yet. They have other needs. Yes, there are other agencies such as Wayne Metro Community Action Agency, one of our wonderful partners, but they don't have money available for rent and mortgage assistance. They do have money available for utilities and other sorts of things. So setting aside funds in this way is very responsible and also very beneficial to the residents of Westland. And again, it's 6 months initially. If additional 6 months isn't needed, then we will be able to help more than 35 families. And also for all the council members, those are estimated benefits. We never know how many benefits will actually be realized until after we begin to implement the program. So please keep in mind, those are estimated benefits. Some of the funds are set aside to purchase personal protection equipment, including gloves, masks, sanitation, and other items of that sort. And we will work together to get those items out to the community. And then in regard to the small business grants, actually, I'd like to pass it on to Aubrey Berman, our Economic Development Director. She has put together some excellent guidelines, and she can better answer the question.
Aubrey?
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Council President. So the way the program would work is basically mirrored off similarly to the recent Michigan Small Business Relief Grants and also the Paycheck Protection Program. So what HUD requires with this funding is that it's allocated in a nature to combat job loss and to promote job retention. So businesses would be required to show that they were either maintaining staffing levels or that they were, reinstating employment levels back to normal within a certain period of time to qualify. And then the second part of the HUD requirements is that these are employers that employ low to moderate income individuals. So based on my experience with kind of assisting with Wayne County's small business relief grants, we set up kind of a criteria system, a scoring mechanism that would allow us to go through all of the applications and basically provide them a ranking system based on how well they met those criteria. There would be some other criteria as well, profitability of the business, things like that, to make sure that we're really getting the most out of these funds, that we're, helping the people that need it the most, and that also that have the best chance to succeed with the funding. So because of that, it's difficult to know how many people will apply or how many, what the need is without having the program started. So that's kind of why we put in $5,000 to $25,000 grant amounts. I'm certainly open to suggestions from the council if you guys think that those grant amounts should be smaller or larger. That's not set in stone. It was kind of just a suggestion based on what we kind of estimated might be the need. Other than that, I think that covers the kind of the main highlights of the program. And if there's any other questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Aubrey. So I'm going to move real quick to council members Hersberg and McDermott. They've had their hands up for quite a while, so I just want to be fair to all our colleagues here. So Councilman Hersberg.
Thank you, Council President. To Councilwoman Green's comments about maybe moving from 35 to 70, I'm in the middle about that. Long-term assistance might be a little bit better, but if you were to make a motion, I would consider supporting it. Joanne, can you confirm with the rental and mortgage assistance? Are we going to be able to confirm that these recipients are going to be affected by COVID, or is this more of kind of a general assistance that we normally provide with the same criteria?
Yes, through the council president, we would be looking for people who perhaps lost their jobs because of the COVID-19 crisis, things of that sort.
Okay, and then right below the project plans, there's a citizen participation plan, and it says citizen review and comments will be taken May 5th through 11th. Why are we doing that after council's voting on it? Are we going to be voting on this a second time?
No, through the council president. So this is, as I said, very unique, very different for the CDBG program that with the number of years that we've been experiencing it. As you are all familiar with, HUD generally requires a 30-day public comment period. And Congress wrote the CARES Act, wrote the regulations, allowing for a 5-day comment period so that we can begin spending the money quickly. So as a part of that, the city council has to amend the citizen participation plan, but your HUD allows for it all to be done in one resolution. Then we will post for public comments. Of course, if we receive a strong amount of public comments, I certainly would share that information with the council before moving forward.
Okay. Well, it looks good to me, but if some of the other council members want to take a look at changing the numbers, I'm open to motions. So thank you.
Next comes in from Councilmember McDermott.
Well, thank you. So Councilman Hersberg actually asked one of my 2 questions, and thank you, Joanne, for answering that regarding would people who are affected by COVID directly receive the benefit. My other question is regards to what Councilwoman Green had brought up with the $131,000 figure. How did we specifically formulate that number? Through the chair.
Yes, through the council president. As with the other CDBG HUD grant that we get annually, we are allowed to allocate up to 20% of the grant for administration. And so we kept that with the annual grant, we always set aside 20% for administration. And with this, not only do we have the extra expenses of managing these grants, the applications that will be coming through, managing the grant during the period that the grants are being used, but also we're looking at the possibility of some software to help us with that and other like expenses. And so this also will benefit the Community Development Department with all of those things that we'll be administering in conjunction with the Economic Development Department.
Thank you. Nothing further.
I see no other hands raised, so we'll come back to Councilwoman Green.
Thank you. Through the chair to Aubrey, in terms of the small business appropriation, small business owners are eligible for all types of grants, to apply for grants and loans specifically and identically according to the program that you just proposed. The grants, in terms of their payroll, they're eligible for grants and loans. So my question is, has the city thought about the possibility of double dipping by some of these business owners, small business owners who may have already got grant funding or loans that are actually forgivable if they bring these people back to work? And the other criteria is that the loans have, a lot of these loans become grants, even though they are taken out as loans, if they follow the criteria in terms of employment and things. So has the city considered the possibility of double dipping by some of these companies? And I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm saying if we're going to take grant money and give it to some of these small business owners who actually can apply for a variety and may have already received a variety of funding from the government for these particular programs, will these small businesses have to sign an affidavit with us asserting that they have not received any loans or grants through the time of that they submit their application, for us to verify that we're not giving $25,000 that could have went to help people with COVID issues utilized to help with COVID in a totally different fashion? That we don't give them $25,000 and they just got $100,000 from the government that's forgivable if they follow a criteria. So have we thought about requiring them to sign an affidavit asserting that they have not received any loans or grants for that purpose to date? And also to verify whether or not they currently have a loan application open. That way, if that person has already received $25,000 to $75,000 to $150,000 to $500,000 or whatever the case in funding, we can look at helping the people who most need it. That's part of the issue with this federal funding. The people who are hit the hardest and who are having the most issues relative to funding and just staying afloat, those are the people who are not getting the help. They're not getting the assistance that they need. They're not even getting the small business loans that are grants that they've applied for. But at one point, the grant program had dissolved, and then they opened it back up, they being the federal government and multiple other brackets of the government. So I'd like to see some sort of affidavit put in place with these small business owners, or something that they have to verify in an effort for to not beat out the people who most need it. That they have to verify that they have not received any loans programs similar to, like I said, and also to confirm whether or not they currently have an open application, and when do they, what's the turnaround for a decision. I don't think that we should just arbitrarily reward that, because we may be rewarding it to business owners who actually are very, very stable, and especially those who cash flow higher, versus a small mom and pop who may actually need the money and who could keep their people working, but we've taken the money and given it to people who actually don't need the money. And we saw that with the federal funding. A lot of those large companies, and some of them turned the money back in once it was uncovered and a light was shown that they actually took money that they didn't need. So I'd like to see us create a process that considers every loophole so that we help the people who most need it and that they benefit. So with that, I guess if you've already, you have something like that, Aubrey, I would definitely be interested. But if you don't, I would like the city, our legal team or Attorney Falzone or whomever, I'd like to see something before we just start taking applications and handing out money, to where it could potentially be fraud if they come in here and say, hey, I need, I got this amount of people working for me and I'm going to keep Westland working, or I'm going to this, that, and the other. And then they walk away with a nice check and they have 2 or 3 of them already sitting in the bank for the same reason. So with that, I guess I'll close with asking you to confirm, is the city already have something like that set up? And if so, can you send me a copy of it? I'd like to look at what question or questions we'll be asking to avoid that. And then as it relates to the 35 families, if this virus goes long-term, the federal, there are discussions happening in terms of funding that will be reviewed and possibly dispersed at a later date anyway to help people with housing. So if 35 families to benefit for 1 year is not only excessive, to me, it's not necessary, because the government is going to look at what's going on anyway and determine if we have to come up with another funding program. And they're even considering something like that now, although it hasn't passed with the stimulus. It is another stimulus check necessary. So to assume that these people will get funding and we'll snatch it back and we don't have any other way to help them, I don't think that is even going to be the case, because there will be an assessment, a national assessment done in terms of funding and what is necessary at that time. And I also think that it is not a good decision to start shelling out money for a long-term basis up front without there being segmented review. It should not, if we give, I don't think that anybody should be able to re-up after 6 months when we can help as many people as possible right now. So I would make a motion. I'd actually like to see us help more than 70 people, because we don't necessarily have to do 6 months. We can do 5 months and extend it out and see how many people we can help just by shaving it down to 5 months. You know, but I'm definitely not in agreement with the 35 for up to 12 months. So I would make a motion that the rental funds, that the rental assistance portion be revised to help a minimum, and if we weigh in and decide that we want to do 5 months instead of 6, but a minimum of 70 families for a total of 6 months, at which time a review can be done for, no, I mean, funding will, like I said, there's programs and different funding discussions happening in Washington and also at the state capitol. So yeah, I make a motion to revise the rental assistance to from 35 families to assist a minimum of 70 families for a period of up to 6 months.
Support.
There's a motion by Councilwoman Green, supported by Councilman Hersberg. Mr. Clerk, if you could restate the motion as you have heard it, try and bring some clarity to it, because there was a lot going on there, so we're having a hard time.
Regarding item 7, to revise the stipulation involving rental funds to help a minimum of 70 families for up to 6 months. That's what I thought I heard.
And that's listed after the estimated benefits portion, correct?
I don't have the document.
Okay.
That's after I'm trying to pull it up too.
Oh,
That's
hold on. So I'm trying to get some clarity from the clerk here. So hold on. So Councilman Green, with regards to your motion, is that clear what your motion was?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. So that is the motion for housing.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor as described by the clerk. Is there any discussion on that motion? Councilwoman Green, or excuse me, Rakowski, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Relative to that motion, really what I have through the chair is a question for Joanne. When do you anticipate giving those grants to the homeowners or renters? You know, obviously when we're in this crisis and we're talking about forbearance and deferrals, many times that money can be come due at once. So if you're deferring for 3 months, that 4-month payment is when you need that grant. So are you anticipating supplementing as we go, or are you anticipating those people coming to you at a later moment in time when that forbearance or that deferment is up? I would like to see more people helped as well, but you know, it's one of those administrating of the program as well. You know, because there may be people who are okay this month, but next month they're not okay. And then they're going to catch up. And, you know, sometimes it feels like if we're doing multiple payments for a 6-month block, when they may not need that assistance in 6 months, they might just need it sporadically. So that would be my question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you through the council president. And that is an excellent question because this is a brand new type of thing coming before us. And so we don't really know a lot of the answers, just like COVID-19, we don't know a lot of the answers, and we're all trying to move forward as best we can. And so the vision is that as families, when they're, you know, once again have to be paying their rent and have to pay the back rent, that we would be providing assistance for that continuous amount of time. So not sporadically. That is not the vision of the guidelines that we've put together.
Any other questions relative to this motion? Joanne, just I'll ask the question relative to, oh, never mind. Councilman Godbout chimed in. I'll let him go first.
Thanks. I'm just curious. So if we, and Joanne, maybe you can help me with this. The motion on the floor is to change the proposal from 35 households to 70. But I'm assuming that based off of your estimated benefit, that 219,000 was consumed by those 35. So if we double the number to 70, are we going to have to cut that number in half as far as the amount that we're going to pay out to each one of those families?
Through the council president, that was consumed by 12 months because those of you who know me well know that I'm very conservative. And so I would rather present a conservative budget and come back to you and say, we have extra money, can we spend it this way? So, so if we cut the time frame of the rent or mortgage assistance to 6 months, we would be able to assist 70 families at $500 a month each. And again, even the $500, that is an estimate. You know, a family might not need $500. Not everybody will get a flat $500. It will be based on their actual need. And some people, you know, their rents might be $750 a month, but they might have some other source to help pay, or they might be able to afford to pay 500 of it and only need 250 to make up the difference. And so we want it to be fluid in that way, but we don't need to cut the amount, the average amount, nor do we need to increase the amount allocated to this particular project if we limit it to the 6 months rather than extending a possibility of 12.
So in essence, we would just cut the amount of time that we would be able to provide assistance to people that may need it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Godbout. That was my question. So yeah, you asked it for me. So is there any other discussion on this motion? Okay, Councilmember Rakowski, you have your hand up.
Can I just have the motion restated, please?
What I have is to modify the rental funds to help a minimum of 70 families for up to 6 months.
Is there any other unclarity towards the motion? Is there any other discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Godbout.
No.
Councilwoman Green.
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg.
Yes.
Councilman Londo.
Yes.
Councilman McDermott.
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski.
Yes.
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Now we're going back to the original motion as amended now. Is there any other discussion? Of course. Councilwoman, oh, we got three of Councilwoman Green.
Yes, through the chair to Aubrey, could you clarify if there is, relative to my comment about the possibility of double dipping and helping those businesses who most need the funding? Is there anything in the application or selection process that would kind of alleviate the ability for people to double dip who've already received grants and loans, in terms of requiring them to clarify that or to confirm that up front, to be as it relates to fraud, possibly requiring them to sign an affidavit or some sort of legal document asserting that they have not received funding or that they have an open application with the government. Can you speak to that?
Sure. And so through the chair, one of the great things about having this program at the local level instead of the federal or state or even county level is it will allow us to manage it a little bit more closely. And so certainly we will be working with all of the applicants to confirm that there is actually a need. And they will have to certify that they are not accepting more funding than they need to be able to retain the employees as a part of the program. So I would say that I'm not sure that just because you received a $2,500 grant from the Michigan Small Business Relief Fund that you should be disqualified from these funds. And also if you're waiting on loan funding to come through, there may be a need for some short-term capital in the meantime, that this could help you kind of get through that window period. So I don't know that we would want to eliminate anyone that was able to secure any other type of funding, but we would certainly work with every applicant and make sure that there was an actual need before we release any funds to the businesses.
Thank you. And no, I agree that that shouldn't disqualify people, but I think that they should have to state up front whether or not they have already received funding. And I think that that should be considered in terms of selection. But I don't think it should disqualify, because even the grant program that we're proposing ranges between $5,000 to $25,000. But we also have businesses in Westland that are not suffering right now. Every business in our city or even nationally are not suffering due to COVID. So when we open up the criteria, I think that there should be some sort of affidavit that requires them to legally state how much money, if any, they have already received, and if they have applied for other funding, because the funding that you described is nearly identical to the funding that is already in place for small businesses. And I'm speaking as a small business owner. And there are tons of funding opportunities for small business owners, and all of the loans become forgivable if you follow the criteria. So I would like, in terms of, again, us keeping this process equitable and above board and equally beneficial and fair to everybody in the city of Westland, and not just what is said at times, those who may have relationships with the city, but everybody. I think that they should have to specify that. And actually, there's questions that the bank requires, similar questions the banks make you answer that question as well. So I don't think the city of Westland should do anything less. And I think we should document that in terms of, trying to avoid double dipping. So I would like to see that happen, because there may be FOIAs at some point regarding who got the money, and there may be truckloads of accusations in terms of improprieties in terms of who got the money. So I just think being forward thinking in terms of this and alleviating the possibility of what may appear to even be the smallest impropriety is exactly how we should proceed. So I think that we should include that. And also, as it relates to the project administration dollars of $131,000, I'm not in agreement with giving the city that much money of the federal funding. When we have families here suffering, I get calls all the time from senior citizens who just happen to remember my email from a city council meeting, or they went on the city website and called me. These people need help. We all have gotten emails from senior citizen centers asking for gloves and masks. So I'd like to see us do more. And again, like, this city obviously is not suffering from compensation packages that we offer, compensation or benefit. So when we have residents who are actually suffering, some who can barely find a roll of toilet paper right now, to keep 131,000 of 657 and we pocket it, I'm not in agreement with that. I would like to see us keep no more than half of that and take the other $65,000 and help people who are looking at losing their house or being set out with their kids, or people who owe the city whatever utility program we can, whether it's water or what have you. I'd like to see us put that money towards social programs, which was the original reason why the government gave it to us anyway. And I think that we can run a very well-oiled process without taking $131,000 of 657 when we have people suffering. So I will make a motion that the project administration fee that the city of Westland is going to retain as revenue be reduced from 20% to 10%.
Motion on the floor. Is there support? Is there support? Motion dies due to lack of support. Council President Pro Tem Londo.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you to my colleagues for asking a lot of great questions. I had a few times I went to raise my hand, but the questions were answered. I lost my train of thought here, but it was something to do with the administrative cost, but there was, the citizens plan. So obviously we're approving this tonight and you have the citizens plan. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that through the chair to Joanne Campbell? And then also, if we get a lot of resident feedback and there's some suggestions, some valuable suggestions that you feel and the administration feels are worthy to bring forward to us, how would we go about making extra changes down the road after the citizens plan? Some citizens comment portion.
Yes, thank you through the council president. Just like with the regular CDBG grant, if we need to make amendments to the use of funds, I would come back to a future city council meeting with a recommendation for redistributing the funds.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions from the council? Councilman Hertzberg.
Thanks. And just to tee off Councilman Londo's comment, through the chair to finance, this 131,000 in project administration, that'll be additional to our current budget, correct?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
So there would be nothing stopping us, let's say, from coming back in 2 weeks at a council meeting and proposing a plan to buy more personal protection equipment or what have you. We could still use that money for something else, right? Okay.
Through the chair, yes, that'd be up to council to decide.
Okay, thank you.
Council President Pro Tem Michael Londo.
I apologize, Council President. I remember what my second question was. So through the chair to, I guess, the police chief, or not the police chief, police and fire chief, I guess, how are we looking on PPE long-term? Dr. Fauci is out there saying that we might see another outbreak, a major outbreak in the fall, winter. How are we looking on PPE, and should we allocate dollars to stockpile more so that we're ready for it in the future.
Chiefs, which one wants to go first? Raise your hand or just go ahead and hop in. There you go. Chief Stradner, please.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, Councilman Landau, we were very proactive in the beginning and have been throughout getting the proper PPE that we need. And the city does have some funds available where we're ordering another bulk order of PPE for future events should they take place, and we'll be able to stockpile quite a bit of equipment.
It's great news. Thank you, Chief.
All right. Is there any other discussion? Councilman Godbout.
Thanks. Through the chair to Joanne again. Joanne, on the provision for the rent and mortgage assistance, would that start with June or July, or is that available for people that are currently behind, so that their payments from April and May, for example, would be covered under that amount?
Yes, thank you through the council president. The guidelines are written that it can be retroactive to April 1st. The city is allowed to spend the CDBG CV funds back to the date that the CARE Act was signed by the president. And so given that it is possible that there are families who have been affected by COVID-19, retroactively, the guidelines are written to help them if that is the need.
Okay, so that we've already voted to increase it to 70, but that means potentially that money could be gone by October, end of September, 1st of October now. Okay, thanks.
Is there any other discussion? Is there any other discussion? Roll call.
On item 7, as amended, Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
No, due to project administration funds.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
Yes.
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
Yes.
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes again as amended. New business item number 8, approval of successor collective bargaining agreement between the city of Westland and the Westland Police Officers Association.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Councilwoman Rakowski, supported by Councilman Hersberg. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
Yes.
Councilman Londo,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
Yes.
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. New business, item 9, approval of voucher.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Hersberg,
Support.
support by Councilman McDermott. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Godbout,
Yes.
Councilwoman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Hersberg,
Yes.
Councilman McDermott,
Yes.
Councilman Londo,
Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
Councilwoman Rakowski,
Yes.
President Hart.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
We now move to comments from the public. At this time, the public can speak for up to 3 minutes to address the council with their concerns. Remember to adhere to the rules that no personal attacks will be tolerated during comments from the public. At this time, if you're using the Zoom app, you can either raise your hand or via your phone, hit *9 to raise your hand, and then *6 to unmute your phone. First one I have in the queue is phone number again ending in 354. 354.
Yeah, my biggest concern tonight is the fact that you guys have the greenhouse of Walled Lake trying to move to Westland. He has essentially ruined the entire city of Walled Lake on multiple facets, multiple levels for the last several years. Bringing him to your town, which he did help get elect, Londo voted in, Rutkowski voted in, will be an issue for your town. These are not personal attacks. These are simple facts based on information that is published online. Is this something that you want for Westland? Do you want Westland to fail at the level that Walled Lake has? If you do, please welcome the greenhouse to your town. The ultimate trash. Welcome, Jerry Miller. Out.
Okay. Next, we have phone number ending in 017. I believe that's Mr. Graham.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Good
we can.
evening. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Council President Hart. Just frankly amazing that the rest of council do not want to help more residents by reducing the maximum fee of 20% down to match, say, Canton's of only 10%. That's $65,000 that could go get, say, 100,000 masks to help the seniors. Why in the world does the 6 council members not support reducing that so you can get more of these care items into, say, the seniors? Just outstanding. I mean, just amazing that that wasn't done. Shameful, frankly. To continue, not one police officer in next year's budget, nor over the next 4 to 5 years. Sad to hear about the furloughs, but it had to be done, and frankly should have been done sooner. Shame all the raises that were given to the highest earners in the city, but the low-income earners like police, fire, DPS, etc., only saw very small increases. So many of the low-income earners in the city have been furloughed. One example is our Parks and Rec director. He was furloughed, but only makes $40,000 per year, while the facilities director, Vic Barra, is not furloughed, and he's around $60,000 per year, and Wild wants to increase his pay around 70%. 70%. Again, not one police officer. Amazing that Councilman Landau, along with Mr. Godbout, maybe why Mr. Godbout does not get the police union endorsement, pushed back hard on Councilman Herzberg and Councilwoman Green, who wanted to hire just one more police officer. Interesting that Mr. Godbout wants to and agrees with Mayor Wild in raiding the library, so they have to use their surplus. Equally interesting is that Mr. Godbout especially, but also Mr. Landau, do not want to dip into the city's surplus of $5 million, actually now $6 million, not for just one more police officer. Why does Mr. Godbout want to take from one department but not give to another department? Interesting that Mayor Wild wants to give Vic Barra, made-up position of facilities director, an approximate 70% increase, $40,000, and Deputy Mayor Reddy's niece, economic director, an approximate 15% increase in pay, $12,000. Interesting, all the lucrative pay and benefit increases for the highest earners within the city that Team Wild approved, but no money for just one police officer. To be clear, there's plenty of money for police officers, but Team Wild only selects the few to enjoy the massive increases in pay and benefits on the back of the taxpayers. Police union, what do you think of all the lavish increases, while peanuts for your rank and file? Hold on, folks. Mayor Wild stated during a budget meeting on the 25th, there is a possible millage increase coming for the police, a tax increase. Wild wants to take and then take some more so he can reward the select few first. Amazing. Not one additional police officer in the budget.
Mr.
Not
Graham,
very compassionate.
Mr. Graham, you've
Thank you,
reached
sir.
your 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that from the public would wish to speak? We have someone name of Smith. I will allow your talk button now. I believe you'll have to unmute yourself. I did allow. The only information I have is Smith. Your hand's up. I have allowed talking. You'll have to probably unmute yourself through your app.
Hi, this is Denise Sedman. I don't know why it says Smith.
Very good.
Okay, you can hear me?
We can. So now we're all set. Go ahead, Denise.
Okay, thanks. I have two questions. The one question is, I wasn't clear, do the citizens get to comment on how the COVID funds are spent? I didn't understand that part. And then number two question is, I see that we have a 20% administrative fee, whereas when I looked at Canton's budget, they only had a 10% administrative fee. Is 20% normal, or is that what other communities do and maybe just not Canton?
I think usually a lot of times these questions will be asked during or answered during the council section. I don't see the mayor at the moment. Joanne, did you want to address this real quick?
Yes, thank you through the council president. I can just quickly summarize the grant, how city council approved the grant funds for 3 projects. One is to provide small business grants. The second is to assist low-income families with rent and mortgage payments for up to 6 months. And the third is to purchase PPE, personal protection equipment, to assist residents, organizations, and small businesses throughout the city. And yes, it is common under the Community Development Block Grant to allocate 20% of funds towards administration.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I just wanted to ask, does the citizen have any any comments that it can make still, or once you vote on this issue, then it's done and approved?
It's done and approved at this point. You can always, oh, nope, correct me.
Okay.
We do have a little other comment section. Joanne, you want to explain that? Joanne?
I'm sorry, Council President, was there another question?
You know, Miss Edmond, can you, we're having a little issues with the app here, so I think we're cutting in and out. If you want, just frame up your questions, send them to me in an email, and I'll make sure I get them over to the appropriate people, and we'll get your questions answered.
Okay, thank you very much, Council.
Thank you. All right, are there any other questions from the public? Second call, any other questions from the public? Third and final call. All right, we'll close comments from the public. We'll move to comments from the administration. Deputy Mayor, are you speaking today for the mayor? Okay, no comments. Anything from legal? All right, we'll move into council comments, starting with Councilman Hertzberg.
I have no further comments this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Green.
Thank you. I would like to start by informing the community that if you or anyone you know is struggling with rental payments, mortgage payments, utility payments, food, funeral expenses, etc., you can contact Wayne Metro. One of their telephone numbers is 313-388-9799. Again, 313-388-9799. If that is not the correct, or the office that's closest to you, they will tell you which office to contact. You can also dial *211 to get the Goodfellows on your phone. They are helping with similar resources. Or you can also contact your local DHS office. That's D as in David, H as in Harry, S as in Sam. You can Google it. They have plenty of resources as well as food resources for people who are in need. For those of you who may be suffering during this time from a mental standpoint, or just need someone to talk to, as we all do, this crisis is definitely not something that any of us are used to. There is a disaster distress helpline. Again, if you or anyone in your family are in need of emotional support during this difficult time, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, which is a government administration, a national mental health organization, is offering free disaster distress to you at this time. It is a 24/7, 365-day-a-week counseling hotline to support anybody experiencing emotional distress. related to natural or human-caused disasters, including COVID-19 or drug abuse. You can reach them at 1-800-985-5990. It is completely free and confidential, or you can text "Talk with Us" to 66746. I wanted to thank the City Council tonight for approving the motion to expand the rental assistance and housing assistance for Westland residents. And I just wanted to speak to, again, why I did not support it. It was due to the 20% fee that the city is going to retain as revenue in the amount of $131,000. HUD, or the criteria, allows cities to take up to 20%. But as you can see with other municipalities, they are not keeping the entire 20%. It is an internal business decision. And again, it is revenue for the city of Westland. I would rather see those funds allocated to directly help the people in need, in light of the fact that, again, we have seen multiple salary increases, huge recommendations for increases, and also what some have stated, outrageous contractor agreements that have been approved by City Council, giving upfront fees of more than 33% higher than the last contract, and a locked and annual increase requirement to certain contractors of a 4% mandatory increase year over year. So to keep $65,000 away from families and let the city put it in its pocket is outrageous in the while we're dealing with a national pandemic. And also there was talk of if the city could go back and look at it at a later date. They could, but it would only come before City Council if the city wanted to take those funds and reallocate them. They don't have to do it. The same way the millage for sanitation was put up, and it was saying we might take up to one meal. And as soon as the budget was done, it was, oh, we're taking the whole meal. So just because there's discussion of, well, couldn't we come back later and do this? Yeah, we could, but if they don't want to, they don't have to. So that's $65,000 that could have helped people who are suffering that we're going to put in our pocket. I don't agree with that, but I'm very grateful to the federal government for the funding that we did receive for our residents. I'm going to keep working on my end with the initiatives that I'm working with the governor's office and the attorney general's office and others for programs here at home and actually on a national basis. So again, I wanted to clarify, I am pro help. I am not pro putting money in our pocket as revenue when we have people who are suffering. And then finally, I wanted to once again thank every essential worker. These are the people who a percentage of this country did not want these people to make $15 an hour. And these are the people who are holding our country up, many of them making minimum wage. So when you hear about a fight for 15, think about the people who are holding our country up, who some of them who have become infected with COVID-19 just so we can get our groceries. I want to thank every essential worker, every doctor, every nurse, every medical person, anybody who's working in medicine of all capacities, every mental health coach and counselor, and of course, all of our first responders, police and fire. I'm very grateful to see our police getting somewhat of an increase that they deserve. So I'm very happy about that. And I just thank you. And I close with asking everyone to please exercise patience and compassion. I know we have all types of rules on us that we've never had to conform to. And when you got to wait in these crazy lines, but this could be a matter of life and death. And you don't know what people are dealing with at home. Some of these people could have suffered a loss and a close loss and had to get up and show up for work to help you get you and your family what you need. So please remember that with your words when you speak to people. Exercise a little bit more patient. And if you encounter someone who's not the most patient, just, think about what they may be dealing with from a health standpoint or a personal standpoint that you know nothing about. God bless you, and I will talk to you in 2 weeks. Stay safe.
Councilman Godbout.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to start off this evening by extending my sympathies and condolences to Antoinette Martin on the loss of her husband, Dan. Dan was very active within the community. He was on the board of the Chamber of Commerce for a long time. So I just wanted to recognize the fact that Dan had passed and that he's going to be missed throughout our community. So again, my condolences to Antoinette and the entire Martin family on the passing of Dan. And then just one other thing, and he is still here, the city clerk. If we could get the bookmarks back in on the agenda. There were no bookmarks on this one, which makes it very difficult during the meeting to go to the appropriate section without scrolling page after page to get to the right sections of the agenda. So if we could have those reappear in the next agenda, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll make sure that that happens.
Councilwoman Rakowski.
Thank you. First, I'm happy that our police officers union and the city have finally reached a tentative agreement. It's nice to know that they'll be seeing an increase and the multiplier going up, which, you know, makes the public safety, excuse me, career choice a little bit more appealing. They risk so much as it is, so I'm happy to see that. I'd also like to say Happy Firefighters Day to all of our firefighters. May 4th happens to be the day that we recognize them. I'm happy to see that we had some lively debate about the funds, and it seems like everybody is really thoughtful about how they want to be allocated. And I just hope, you know, Joanne is such an expert at what she does. I know she's going to knock it out of the park and get as much help to as many people as possible. You know, and with that being said, we have some executive orders that have been handed down to us, as well as some federal executive orders that get handed down to us. And, you know, we don't always have to like them, but we have to follow them when we are a collective municipality in order for the funding to come back. So, you know, that's one of the things that we have to recognize as we make our plans for some of these funds, is that we have to be within the guidelines so that we can get the reimbursements from the different departments that are going to cover some of the expenses that we're incurring over the time. With that, I hope that you are staying as safe as possible, you know, and you just are starting to enjoy the warm weather like I am. It's been kind of a nice change to hear the lawnmowers going on outside and the flowers blooming. So with that, I wish you peace and see you in 2 weeks.
Councilman McDermott.
Well, good evening. Thank you. So first off, like with every meeting, I'd like to start by thanking our first responders, our frontline workers, our police officers, our firefighters, our paramedics and EMS technicians right here in the city of Westland, all the doctors, nurses, hospital staff, but also those who are working in our grocery stores, stocking the shelves, running the cash registers, delivering the items that we need, the vital items that we need to be able to purchase them from the grocery store, our truck drivers. To echo what Councilwoman Green said, many of these people are working for starvation wages or working just above the minimum wage line. And the fact that there's not a $15 an hour minimum wage, I think is a disgrace, but that is another issue for another day. I would like to thank Officer Egan and his negotiating team, as well as the city negotiating team, for putting together a contract for our police officers that everybody seems to be satisfied with, and makes changes to the tier structure that they were looking for. So Job well done by Officer Egan and his team to be able to get our officers, our fine officers, a contract here and get it ratified in the city of Westland. My condolences too go out to the family of Dan Martin and Antoinette Martin. So very sorry to hear the passing of Dan. So Antoinette and her family are certainly in my thoughts and well wishes and prayers at this time. And then I wanted to agree with the point that Councilman Hertzberg had brought up earlier in regards to the ordinances. I think when we have multiple ordinances that we're looking to make changes to, it would be nice to have, even if brief, a study session to cover some of those changes so that we can better understand as a council and ultimately better inform the public in terms of what the changes are and what specifically we are voting on. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up, it is, as Councilwoman Rakowski mentioned, International Firefighters Day. And one of the things that had been mentioned to me, and I brought this up at the prior budget study session, is can we look into the idea of some kind of uniform stipend for our Westland firefighters and paramedics and EMS technicians? The reason being, when they're out there treating COVID patients, unlike their normal run volume, they have an increased run volume and are ultimately, because of the COVID-19 situation, having to wash their uniforms more frequently, which is putting more wear and tear on those uniforms. So if we can, potentially work with the administration prior to approving this year's budget to allocate a uniform stipend for our firefighters in there to cover some of that wear and tear, whether it's $250 or $500 a month, whatever that amount may be. I think that's something that is definitely worth talking about. And then in closing, I will just state that I hope everyone is staying in, staying safe. I know we've been in this for the long haul and we've still got a ways to go, but the top priority is the safety of everybody here across the city of Westland, across our state and across our country. So please stay home, please stay safe, please continue to follow the guidelines and take care.
Council President Pro Tem Michael Londo.
Thank you, President Hart. Just want to start off again tonight by thanking the IT department for another incredible job with these meetings and all my colleagues. I've watched a few other, we'll just say board meetings or various council meetings in other cities. I know I'm a nerd, I watch this stuff, but the meeting etiquette is just tremendous. I mean, we have some lively debate, but I mean, everyone constantly mutes their lines and the meeting etiquette is just on par. It's great. So like I said, I'm in a lot of Zoom meetings with work and it's not always the case. I'm not sure how many of you guys are on some, but again, I want to thank all my colleagues for that. I'd also like to extend my condolences to the family of Antoinette Martin as well. I met Dan on a few occasions and he was a character for sure and a real nice guy and was very, like as Councilman Gotbout said, very, very involved in the city as far as giving back to the community. Just a couple things I want to clear up. Earlier during I believe it was during the comments on the agenda, it was mentioned that city council, only certain members voted on the Maximus report. It was voted on, it was voted unanimously, and it was February 19th, 2019, if anybody wants to go look that up. And then, I want to touch on the Police Officers Association highlights. I want to start by thanking both negotiating teams, Stephanie Field and personnel, Dan Block as our budget, Jim Fassone and Brandon Gresco from Fassone and Bond, Chief Judge Ruzick. I know I'm missing somebody, Mayor Wild and Mike Reddy, our deputy mayor, and also the whole entire finance team. And obviously Officer Egan, Bristol, Allen, Neville, and the entire membership with the POAM union. I talk to those guys on a regular basis, regardless of what was said tonight, during citizens' comments. It's unfortunate that someone would spin something when I immediately said I'm in support of adding more officers. I'd like to see us add 5 more officers. That wasn't mentioned though, of course not. It doesn't fit a narrative. And it also wasn't mentioned that other council members brought stuff up too. I believe Councilwoman Rakowski brought up, she asked through the chair to the chief, mind you, this was during the April 25th budget study session. She asked the chief what number he would feel comfortable with to get to a level of where he's comfortable right now, but at a number he'd feel comfortable with if we could get to it. He said about 10 more officers. So Andrea, Councilwoman Rakowski said, well, let's get to 10. That wasn't reported on, of course, though. It's just unfortunate that people like to take attacks at certain members and they forget that, last meeting I mentioned that these folks are heroes and we should do something to protect them. That wasn't mentioned, but I'll leave it at that on those. It's also great to see that Beaumont Wayne is opening back up. So thank you to some of my colleagues that helped put some of the pressure on. I was a vocal advocate against that closing over at Beaumont Lane. I believe I talked to Mayor Racy and Wayne. I believe they're going to be opening tomorrow. So that's great news. And then also it's International Firefighters Day, as a few members said. I'd like to thank all of our firefighters here in the city of Westland and all across the country for their efforts, their commitment and dedication now more than ever. Greatly appreciate it. And then just with the furloughs, you know, we're in an unprecedented operating environment with the coronavirus outbreak. The realities of how where and where we work has dramatically changed. We're starting to get a preliminary sense of where we're at with the full economic impact. There's going to be devastating results for local governments, state governments, county governments. The county is projecting a, what do they say? A large deficit, let's just put that, a large shortfall, $150 million shortfall, I believe they said. So state share revenue is not going to come in. We're going to be in some serious trouble. So I appreciate, while I don't like the fact that we had to furlough, I appreciate the administration that worked compassionately with the unions and worked with people to come up with a plan. I know it wasn't easy, and I'm hoping to get them all back as soon as possible. I'm hearing it's going to be temporary, and we'll get them back full time. But if anybody needs anything from me, you know how to contact me. My phone number is 734-223-0200. And with that, I'll close and wish everybody safety and security. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start tonight by thanking Councilman Godbout for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Again, it's a new way of doing it, but it's always interesting, and I love it when you guys give you a chance to do the Pledge of Allegiance. It's fun. Wanted to extend my deepest sympathies as well to Dan Martin and Antoinette Martin, the entire Martin family. For those, he's been in the chamber for a long time. I served on the Chamber of Commerce board with him. And any of you small businesses out there, you know who Dan Martin is, because he was the one who was pestering you to go ahead and put your ads inside the paper for the chamber. But Dan's been around a long time, so he's going to be sorely missed. And my heart goes out to Antoinette. I saw her briefly today. She's handling it well, but she's busy with the business end of a funeral. Once that's over, that's when the pain just sits in for a long time. So I would ask everybody to keep Antoinette and the entire Martin family in your prayers, and rest well, Dan. It's well deserved. Speaking of the chamber, Gretchen Heineke, the president of the chamber, did pass me a note and asked me to share with you. So some positive news. And I'm reading from my phone here. So the Westland Farmers and Artisan Market will be taking place with new social distance guidelines and policies. The farmers market will open Thursday, May 21st from 3 to 7 p.m. at the Farmers Market and Lions Pavilion at Central City Park. We will have select vendors, including food vendors, personal hygiene vendors, and pet food treat vendors. For updated information on vendors, market guidelines, and policies, please visit our Westland Farmers Market Facebook page. So that's from the Chamber of Commerce. A couple other people mentioned the International Firefighters Day. Yes, May the 4th be with you, as well as with our firefighters. So keep them in your thoughts and prayers. And to all of the ones I know, I think I've called you at some point and told you at one way or another. And if I didn't, please accept this as a personal thank you for everything you do. Mr. Clerk, I wanted to thank Mr. Godbout for bringing up the bookmarks, because it was frustrating for me. I can only control F so much before it just doesn't work anymore. So the bookmarks are a huge time save for us, and I'm sure it was just oversight, whatever. It's a new world, and we're trying to do things as much as we can in different environments. So just a little feedback. So thank you to Councilman Godbout for bringing that up. Last messages to my colleagues. As you know, we've gone through these budget sessions. We want to schedule one more to deep dive into those departments everybody's interested in. Okay, so I only have a couple that I've written down. So I'm going to try and put together this email tonight or tomorrow. But in the interim, please send me those areas that you want to deep dive in. Because if we're going to schedule another study session, I want to make sure we work with the administration. They work with their calendars. I'd hate to drop one on them at the last minute, come to find out one of the directors that you wanted to talk to had something planned, whatever it may be. There's not so much vacation being planned right now, but regardless, we need to be sensitive to their time frame and schedules if we're going to bring them in on an off hour, off day. So please send me your emails with the departments that you want to go a deep dive in, so I can communicate with the administration and get them pulled together for another meeting, so we can kind of sit down and look at those a little bit closer. I would encourage that probably this will be post May 12th. That way the RFP is back from the sanitation budget. So just kind of keep that in your mind. It may also be that the distancing guidelines might be lifted by then. I'm not too optimistic. So location will be TBD. It was asked before, if the social distancing stay-at-home order is lifted and we can meet in person, I will meet in person because I'm so excited to see you guys all in person. I haven't seen you guys in a while. So if we still have the stay-at-home order, we'll continue to do the Zoom meetings as we've been doing them because you guys have been so good at it. So thank you for everything. Thank you for all your input today. Thank you for your heated debate. Thank you for your long debate. And thanks for keeping me back on even when I slipped on one. So you guys got me there. So take care of yourselves. God bless. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.